Ready. There we go. Welcome, welcome everybody. Trickling in. Darcy, good to see you. Josh, Stinton, man, been a minute. What's up? First one in the chat. As always, big fan. Julie, Randy, what's up, you guys? Good to see all of you. Where are you chatting in from today? I know some of you are on the road and stuff. Where are you at right now? Let's see who's in the coolest location. Boston, pretty cool spot. I know Nat's a fan of that part
I
of the
know.
world.
Oh yeah.
Germany, that's cool. Toronto, what's up? I'm from Minnesota, so I feel like we're related. Yeah, Becky, nice. Minnesota, cool. Dave Bricker, Miami, of course. uh, Nan, good to see you too. Minnesota in the house. It's awesome.
Steve Hughes, great
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, Steve. Hey, Nat, what's up with the basketballs behind you? What's going on
Um,
back there?
yeah, I'm preparing actually for a speaking event that I'm doing. I'm on tap to actually facilitate a workshop and then an event for the National Basketball Hall of Fame. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow, you
yeah.
really
So
tailored that. Did you like buy the basketballs for that, or
yeah,
did you have like three basketballs laying around?
part of my past life was being an on-court and on-field MC for years for various events and teams, and so
Wow.
I have a lot of weird crap down here in my
Weird stuff
basement
laying
as I
around.
look
Yeah, just
around.
swap it out. Yeah, depending on the gig. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
awesome. Heck yeah. Uh Steve, I actually just saw that comment, budget hotel. Nice, living large.
Yeah,
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 for
yeah.
sure. Heck yeah. All right, well, we're gonna do the typical let folks trickle in. We'll probably get started at the 5 minute mark, and I'll do Nat's intro and all that fun stuff. But I'm kind
Yep,
of curious
yep.
for those of you that are here right now, why are you here? Why did you register? What was interesting about, the value boost and turning speaking gigs into packages? Give some Nat some context for
Yeah,
hitting some of your
absolutely.
goals.
Yeah. And also,
I know.
Josh, in your answer, you have to tell us what you'd like me and Taylor to provide you as a prize for being the first in the chat as well.
Oh, the
That's
first in the chat. Yeah,
yeah.
should I like have a plaque
And
that I give people
well, I think
first in
Josh,
chat?
yeah, Josh can dream whatever he wants, but then we can discuss as to whether or not we will provide
Sure.
it for him.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I like that. No marketing bones in my body. Yeah, fair
Mm,
enough. We hear that
mm.
a lot, don't we, Nat?
Hmm.
Letting people know about speaking and consulting
Nice,
fees.
nice,
Yeah.
nice.
Yep. What else? Half court shots. All right. Well, you're gonna have to deliver on that, Nat. You're gonna have to
Guess
help
what?
Josh with the half court shots. Yeah.
We got basketballs right here.
Yeah. Oh, Darcy, this is interesting. I'm concerned that packages might complicate things
Love it.
unnecessarily.
Great
Yeah.
answer. Great
Good
answer.
perspective. Yeah.
Hmm.
Best practices for getting books and courses into speaking engagements. Yeah, those bundled offerings. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's tough to get a gig in the first place. Would love to know how to leverage a client who already knows and trusts me. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Building it up.
Hmm.
Yeah. Learning about best practices in packaging for sure. Nice.
Love
What
that.
else?
Yeah. Why else are you here? What do you
I mean,
want? What do you
outside of just,
need?
looking at our beautiful faces.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Ways to amplify the value with options. Yeah.
Love it.
Creative
Love it.
compensation components. Yep, for sure. Started in training and
Mm.
consulting, looking at this from the reverse engineering approach. Yeah, totally.
Candace, welcome to my world. I love it.
Yeah, heck yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I say let's just get the show on the road. We are about there. For those of you who don't know Nat, Nat and I go way back, like to just like, I mean, weeks after starting SpeakerFlow, maybe even before we even had our LLC, we were talking.
Mhm.
So I've known Nat for a while. He's an awesome guy. And I've personally watched him take several speakers that we share clients with and turn them from just like standard this is my fee for my gig into offering packages. And quite literally, like in the title where he says the value boost 10x the price tag of your speaking packages. I won't name names for this client, but I remember one of the very first clients we were working with was like $5,000 a gig. Pretty good, right? I mean, let's acknowledge that
Mhm.
on an average 5,000, but turning it into $50,000 speaking packages basically. And I personally watched Nat do this with this client, and ever since I've been the biggest fan. So, Professor Nat Measley, by the way, works with speakers to exponentially increase the value of their speaking businesses. He's worked with former sports figures, pro athletes, executives, leaders, and some of the most motivational speakers in the world. He's been the corporate event and in the corporate event and conference world for 20 plus years. He's an adjunct professor at various universities, teaching courses in entrepreneurship, leadership, workplace culture. And you can learn all about Nat and everything he does at natmeasley.com, all of which I will share with you later. And I'm sure Nat will as well. So, Nat, this has been a long time in the making, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the group here today. I'm just going to hand it off to you and let you work your magic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a big virtual round of applause for Taylor and Austin, who were the first two I met at SpeakerFlows years ago. And yeah, some of your early work, and it's been amazing to watch. And a big part of watching your success, Taylor, I know, is something you've already done on this call, which relates directly to what we're working on today, which is leaning into relationships and getting to know people. Right? The average webinar host starts the webinar at 1 o'clock, and then we sit there for a couple of minutes, and maybe someone's gonna accidentally hit, a space bar in the chat. Oh my God, I hit enter. And I sent the chat. Not Taylor, not Austin, not SpeakerFlow. Hey, Steve, what's up? Where are you logging in for? Anu, how you doing? Candace, what's up? Tell us more. Give us more info. How can we help you more? And I think that's so incredibly powerful. So that is my only goal today, is to help you. I'm going to do so by introducing a theory that I call the value boost, that I've put together based on my experience, as Taylor alluded to, in working with some of the world's best motivational speakers in how they 10x the price tag of their speaking packages. And I'll use that word on purpose, speaking packages throughout the day. And here's the format for today. I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of introduce where we're headed as well, because I have a presentation that's going to load up here, and we're talking about the value boost. The agenda is simple. There are 5 parts. My hope is we'll go through each of them fairly briefly, and I'm going to pause at the end of each of the 5 parts. The parts, by the way, are not complex. It's V, A, L, and U, and E. Okay. So pretty simple. And at the end of each part, we're going to pause. And at that point, Taylor's going to hop back in, and he's going to help me to watching the chat to facilitate any questions that might come up throughout that part. Within each part, you're going to hear an intro and an idea from me. So V, for example, is to start to verify who you are, and we'll talk about that. And I'll share an idea and a thought. I'm going to share some data and stories, as Taylor also alluded to. By day, I am a real life college professor. So you'll hear my whole story here in a second, but I have my master's degree in organizational leadership. It led me into the team building and conference and event space for nearly 15 years, and led me to boomerang back to academia. So I teach one class each semester at my alma mater. If you saw in the chat, I'm from Delaware. I need the Wayne's World background, right? Delaware. So I teach this one class at the University of Delaware every semester. So I love bringing in data and also some anecdotal stories about my experience and career. And then also at the end of each of these pieces, like I've been on multiple, speaker trainings and webinars. And again, I hope to help you in some way. Like maybe this entire theory is brand new to you, or maybe you find one little nugget, and that's beautiful. I want to give you some hacks so you can walk away with some actionable, like, what do I do after Professor Nat's value presentation? So at the end of each piece, each of those 5 pieces, after the intro and some data and stories, a hack for you to walk away with. Before we get to the first part, which is the V, I wanted to quickly introduce myself to you. So Professor Nat Measley, the long story short you saw in the chat earlier too, is born and raised in Hershey, Pennsylvania, had a sweet childhood growing up that is like pun fully intended, went away to college and school, got involved in the sports marketing world. I worked for Ripken Baseball. I was an on-field MC and game entertainment coordinator and marketer for the first few years of my life, started a team building company. I was the main facilitator for this company, became the managing partner and CEO. I'm running through this quickly because the webinar is not about me, but it's great to give you a sense of who you have facilitating today. from 2016 until about just after the pandemic, I continued to do every week. I have an argument that I facilitated more team building and culture events for companies than anyone else on the planet. In my heyday, I was doing like 2018, about 50 events a month. When you pause and think about that math, it's wild, but our model was different. We were popping in to do shorter activations, to just try to understand that people's day at work doesn't have to be as bad as it appears in the real world. While meanwhile, Gallup's data came out again from last year that we're closer now to 70 to 80% of Americans specifically hate their jobs. So my expertise and background with me, you get like part practitioner. I've done this stuff. I'm a speaker. I'm a trainer. I go out and facilitate. I even teach college classes. And you get a scientist because I am a professor and I got my master's degree in organizational leadership. And so I think about it in that sense. I think about the speaking business in that sense. And I think because of that, it's helped me to work with some of the speakers who Taylor said would remain nameless earlier. I'm about to name and give some great stories and ideas. But that's me. That's Professor Nat. Taylor also said we'll dive into like how you can stay in touch with me towards the end of the webinar, and I want to leave time at the end for Q&A as well. So we'll do more of that. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the training. There's 5 pieces, right? And I'll consistently try to remind you of where we are among these 5 pieces. The first piece is the V in this value boost model that I'm offering you today. The V is about verifying your client's needs. I saw in the chat earlier, like you don't want to overshoot a price point, or you don't want to undershoot a price point, or you're not sure maybe what is the client looking for? How do I best build trust and relationships with those speaking clients who I've already been working for to exponentially increase like that relationship, but also the value? Here's an idea for how to better verify your client's needs. It's a simple process that we actually teach in our Intro to Entrepreneurship classes. It's called customer discovery. So this is a system and a process that is in place with most successful entrepreneurs who are out there trying to understand what a client's need is so they can then deliver upon it. And as you see in this basic model, the consultant or the speaker, in this case like you, assesses who that client is, identifies what a need might be that they could help with, drafts the solution, and then tries to go test that solution. I want you to rethink all of your speaking engagements as tests. I think as speakers, and I'm the same, we want it to be perfect, right? We want the lighting to be great. We want the lavalier microphone to be the perfect volume. We want the presentation behind us when you hit the next slide and the video doesn't play, for the video to actually play and to hit the next slide. We want it to be perfect. And what I argue is if you look at your clients as a relationship and take them through this process of ongoing and ever-ending customer discovery, if those things happen, and again, we'll do everything we can so that they don't, but if those things happen, it's not the main focus. It's not the worst thing in the world. Like I work with a speaker who calls all of those little moments in a room like that, and you've all been there, I'm sure. Sunken clowns. Seth Godin offers this advice that sunken clowns are those things you just can't control. So do you worry about them because they're sinking, or do you keep pushing ahead? This process of customer discovery is a couple interesting things. It's cyclical, so it's ongoing. And also what it offers for you as that speaker / ongoing consultant is potentially the opportunity to identify and understand different problems at the organizational level with your clients. I didn't know this. Until, and here's my anecdote and story for you within this section. Until I was invited to go to the Daytona 500. Any race fans out there? If you're a race fan, in the chat, tell me who your favorite driver is right now. Okay, Taylor, who's your favorite driver? Taylor raised his hand.
Favorite driver, like in NASCAR or
Yeah.
in like, oh, NASCAR. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I go back to the old days. I was there watching Dale Earnhardt,
Mm.
yeah, in the early days, like Dale Earnhardt Sr.
Okay,
So
nice.
he was my favorite for the longest time. Still got a big number 3 in my garage. Of course, Junior ain't so bad, but Jeff Gordon, not so much. But
Okay, okay, great. Then you'll love this story. Okay, then you'll love this story. Again, I didn't understand this process of like really uncovering the needs of the client through this process of customer discovery until uh, when I left the team building company. One of my first assignments as an individual speaker and facilitator consultant was to work with a program from the University of Delaware called the Go Baby Go program. Long story short, they redesign ride-on cars like toy Jeeps, cars, Barbie Jeeps for kiddos with disabilities. So you can see in this picture, Jamel is in the car. He's the one in the back who has a tube in his nose, who has his hands over his ears because this is the worst day of his life, because there's a lot of noise and a lot of people. And we were actually at the Daytona 500 producing an event where drivers, like that's Casey Kane on the left holding up a sign that says Team Jamel, were showing up to help re-engineer and design the cars for kiddos, toddlers with disabilities, spina bifida, MS, cerebral palsy, and others that affected their mobility. It was an amazing event, like as a pure team building event. But I didn't understand the true value in it until later that night. And we were up in the center injector site. This was our view at the Daytona 500. If you're a race fan, this is the view. It's like the freaking Super Bowl. Okay. And the head of sales came over to me. His name is Mike Cash. Great name for the head of sales from the company that paid us $150,000 to do this workshop. Okay. We had 10 cars. We had engineers there. We had people from Florida Hospital. It helped to cover the cost of the families traveling, like about 150 grand for an hour-long event before the race, the day before the race. And we're up there, and Mike comes there and says, "Hey, Nat, great job. Thanks again for helping to produce the event and speaking. It was amazing. The kids got the cars. Our employees were happy. Casey Kane was happy. Everyone was happy." I said, "Sure, Mike. Yeah, no problem." Like, still thinking, why in the world have you paid us $150,000? Why'd you put that amount of money aside? He said, "Hey, Nat, hang on a second." He went over and met somebody over in the left side of the room. He went over and met somebody in the right side of the room. It was the head of paint coatings for Toyota and the head of paint coatings for Ford. And they were up in the center injector, the big skybox with us. And Mike came back to me a couple minutes later and said, "Oh, sorry, Nat, what were we talking about? I'm sorry. I had to go sell a $500 million worth of paint coatings to Toyota. What were we talking about again?" And it hit me like a Blue Angel jet right in the face. The reason that Exalta, which was the sponsor in the company, paid us to come and do this event, and they invited their top clients and some of their top executives to create a culture of giving. This was a big part of their corporate social responsibility program. They donated millions to other organizations like Go Baby Go. Ducks Unlimited was another big, a great nonprofit nationally. Was because they used us. They used us to make $500 million painting Toyota trucks the next year. Here's the lesson. And this is your hack from part one. And I'm going to give you this hack, and then I'm going to kind of pause for some questions or thoughts about this. In this process of customer discovery, I didn't know that going in. I didn't understand. I didn't ask Exalta, not just what was their budget for the event, for the speaking, for the facilitation, but also what was their big picture goal? What was their end goal with this? If I had known it was $500 million in paint sales, if I had known what I know now, I would have been talking to Mike about how we could do these workshops all over. I would have been talking to Mike about the ongoing years, and I might have slid him a bill for $1 million for a 5-year contract to build as many cars as we could. And he might have said yes because he believed in it so much. Now, I told you a little bit about my career path. It's ended with me working on, in the last few years, a culture consulting company, which is where this niche has emerged of me working with speakers, right? When you're working with companies and they're trying to consider how to make work less awful for their employees, they bring in great speakers like you. They bring them in. Why? Because it can have a positive effect long term on their wants and needs. So my hack for you on your next sales call or even next call with a client you already know, get on the books with them and catch up with them, is to start this conversation of customer discovery with this single question. And I use this every day with my client calls. Hey, what's the state of your culture? Let them tell you all about it. What the hope is you will uncover is there are other departments within the company, like, oh, well, our culture here at the sales team is good, but marketing, oh my God, you can't imagine, or vice versa. Big picture, long term, the state of your culture within your organization is a great question that gets that conversation started long term. So that's the V in the value with an interesting story and how I learned this lesson. I won't say the hard way, but I'll pause there. Taylor, any thoughts and or questions from the chat? I can see a little bit too.
Yeah, no questions in the chat quite yet. Feel free to load them up if you have any for Nat. I know we're just
Yep.
getting into it here.
Yep.
But I like how open-ended the state of your culture is because they have to, think about that when they're answering the question. It's also not a question you hear often, like some of us, we have like rapid fire answers to the questions we get all the time.
Mhm.
And so as a decision maker, when you hear like, what's the state of your culture? It's not one you hear a lot. And I feel like its open-endedness can kind of give you a lot of ammunition for packaging up a solution to benefit them, which, is
Mhm.
probably where you're going.
One of the services, Taylor, that I do for the speakers that we work with is closing sales on calls and helping them with that conversation. And I can tell you 90 to 95% of the call is focused on this question, right? It's
I bet.
about the human experience. It's about how do people feel? How long have they worked there? I mean, there are multiple other questions we have in various templates, depending on who we're talking to. But once you can get a sense of who they are as people and humans, what experiences they've had in the past, right? Like, oh, well, our culture is horrible because the speaker last year did X, Y, or Z. Well, that would be great to know because I don't want to do that as a speaker. So yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate your thought on that.
And can you remind us of the four stages? Was it assess, identify, was it draft and test?
Yep, I'm going back to it right now. Yep, assess, which
Nice.
which which I would argue that state of your culture question is a great early assessment question, right? We're just trying to identify what's the state, what's it like working here, what are your people feeling right now, so that you can help them to identify through their answers what the big problems are. Then you draft your solution, then you test it. And this doesn't have to happen with every speaking engagement either. When and if you get efficient at this, I would argue this can happen on a call, right? Like, because I might say, hey, Taylor, what's your problem? And you say this, and I say, okay, well, here's an idea for a solution. I'm kind of drafting it with you. What do you think about that? Even asking that is a test.
Yeah,
And
test.
they can say no, or they can say, ooh, I really like that. So it's a neat model here that again we use to further ingrain relationships or explore new relationships.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Darcy had a good comment too. She said, I think what's the state of your culture feels really complimentary to the client. Everyone wants to talk, right? It's less about you, the person positioning something, and more about them and how you can be a guide for them.
Oh, Darcy, it's fantastic question. Because people love telling you, especially if you're speaking to the leadership, like they are not going to tell you, oh, people hate working here. Uh, right? Oh, it's great. Right? The answer is, oh, it's great. We got a great culture. Look, we got a foosball table over there. Like, okay, sounds
Right.
great. Like, I'm impressed with the foosball table. So,
Shantae has a great question. She says,
oh yeah.
how would that question have helped you with the NASCAR deal? They use the event to drive sales. How would that question help you identify their intent to drive
Yeah,
sales?
I think it's a great question. I think Mike Cash would have said to me, "Hey Nat," at some point before the event, here's why we're doing this event, right? We're bringing together our top clients. That was never really divulged because we didn't have this question at the time.
Yeah.
So our discovery was purely focused on produce the event, get the cars there, get the kids there. We know it's going to be good. I mean, this is the kind of team building event that I've done a lot of them in my career. This one is the best. It was amazing. I mean, people, uh, top level executives crying, holding hands with Casey Kane, like crying because Jamel got a new car. And like the truth of the matter is, this is the greatest day in Jamel's family's life since he's been born. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
but because
Powerful.
we were, that's why they brought us in. It was powerful and it was produced really well. So that's a
Yeah.
great question. I think that's my answer to that one.
Yeah, fair enough.
um,
Yeah. Got time for one more?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think this is a good one too.
Mhm.
So like, I think one of the challenges when you ask somebody a question is like their perception of what the culture actually is could be incorrect to what's actually happening. So Joe asks, what
Yeah,
happens when their perception of their culture doesn't match their actual culture? Is there a way to get a little bit deeper and a question, or maybe many, who knows, to
yeah,
get that more authentic
yeah.
response?
Love it, Joe. Great question. And my answer would be yeah. And the one that I use is how do you track that? Right. So tell me about the state of your culture. Oh, it's good. It's blah, 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 blah. How are you tracking it? Are you doing things like employee engagement surveys? How often are those surveys happening? Putting on my like culture consultant hat here. Uh, the I posted about this on LinkedIn a few years ago that like I tried to yell it from the rooftops that the once a year employee survey, like rest in peace, it's dead. Okay, it's dead. It died because right here's my iPhone. Okay, and Apple is getting data on me every millisecond of the day. And you think reliable data about how people are feeling in your culture is happening at one moment throughout the whole year. So if they answer, which some companies answer, oh, we do pulse surveys every week. We check in with people. We're doing quarterly meetings specific to culture. We have a culture team. Like, okay, great. Like, how are you tracking it, right? How are you functionally focusing on culture, and specifically, are you measuring it? Oh, I love the culture data. In fact, if you're interested in connections, like I love being a dot connector. A company not far from me here in Delaware, just north of the border in PA, is called Energage.com. They do enterprise scale organizational employee engagement data, and then they package it for various top workplaces lists throughout the country. But they are phenomenal. They're top of class in everything they do with data. It's also something we'll talk about in just a couple seconds here that you can do yourself as a value add. You could start to offer that. Hey, I could get a sense of what your culture is here, or what your fill in the blank, right? What is your speaking topic? What's your main learning objective? Maybe it's working with executive leaders on finding their passion. Great. How can you become a someone and a resource for that organization to do that? So get your own
Nice.
data. hmm
Heck yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. So let's cruise on to part two, which is about ascertaining a roadmap template. So this is kind of like uh, a very functional piece of advice in academia, right? You remember, in fact, everybody in the chat, tell us where you went to college, or what's your favorite college out there, college or university. You can use the one you went to, or you can use whoever it is in the chat. Just tell us who's the greatest, right? The college or university in the world. On campus at the University of Delaware, every week, the first week of class, it's syllabus week, right? It's syllabus week. And what happens? Well, the professor hands out the syllabus and you read through it, and there's a template to what that looks like. So I've taken to calling it a roadmap, or even more specifically, a curriculum roadmap for these organizations. So if you're on this call, you probably know that in some way, a way that you can really add value to your speaking business is on those initial calls and through that customer discovery by asking that client, would they want or need additional supports? Would they want more of Joe after his talk, right? Would they want more content from Joe? And the answer is often, well, we'll consider it. And so, do you have the ongoing workshops and trainings? And how do you put together a syllabus, a curriculum, or roadmap for that? Here's my example. Taylor alluded to this guy earlier. I've worked with him, and he got to work with SpeakerFlow a few years ago too, in helping to structure some of his back end parts of his business. This is Dave Raymond. Dave is a great friend of mine. I've known him for years. He's an amazing, one of the best motivational speakers out there in the world. I'm fortunate to get to work with him. Uh, the novelty of Dave's story was that he was the original Philly fanatic, for the Philadelphia Phillies. So 1978 to 1993, he leveraged that into a career in helping other companies and organizations, teams, Manchester City, the Kansas City Chiefs, like a lot of those colleges and universities that are flowing into the chat right now. He's helped their character branding and marketing departments. And about 8 or 9 years ago, Dave started getting requests for speaking. He started going out and telling his story, which he now calls the evolution of happiness. He contacted me and said, Professor Nat, I need your help. How can we help grow this thing? And I said, well, do you do the ongoing training? And he said, well, not yet. I want you to help me facilitate that. So I do. And this is our curriculum roadmap. And just to let you know, Dave was the speaker who early on was getting, like, he has this great network, as you may imagine, in and around Philadelphia. $500, $2,500, $5,000 speaking gigs here and there. He still does some local gigs, right, for those price points when it's right, or there's some personal connection. He always has it. But we used his expertise, and there's some other factors here. He got some great earned media the last few years, including like Jimmy Kimmel, HBO. It doesn't get much bigger than that. But on the back end, he asked me to help him build a curriculum roadmap for his happiness training. And this is it. And this is what, partnered with Dave's keynotes, plus additional ongoing training. Like, we just sold this as a package to a large public school district for a $65,000 price point. So they could all do the ongoing. Dave spoke to their group. We did a follow-up training right there in the room with all of their staff and admins. And then we did ongoing virtual support that related directly to this curriculum roadmap that you're seeing. What makes for a good syllabus or curriculum roadmap? An introduction and the why. These are all the parts you see here. The learning objectives. So what do you want people to learn? So often I see speakers, and I myself am guilty of this too, but you're trying to tell and share so much with people that you forget about having one single thing for them to learn, either in a single class or a single sit down, or maybe one workshop. So trying to make those learning objectives very simple and specific to what it is you're teaching. What do you want people to learn? We call them learning objectives. What's the format of the course? What is the actual coursework? So what will people go through? And then what are the faculty? Who are the faculty? That's Dave and me. So I co-facilitate with Dave as well on these, what we call happiness trainings. So teaching organizations through Dave's model on how to, I don't know if I'd say how to be happy, but really staying focused on how to take care of themselves. It's very popular right now too. The field, and as I've seen in mental health and supports, has become really popular. So that's my idea about getting a roadmap, a quick share about Dave and his story and our successes. Here's the hack. Think about this. Whenever you're out speaking or doing an ongoing training, what is that one learning objective? One. We get a bunch of training on campus to be better professors, right? Every semester in our entrepreneurship program. And one of the greatest tips that I've ever received was, before every class, up on the board or type it on your computer and showcase it to the students, you put up the one thing you want them to learn that day, right? What's the one lesson we are going to learn today together? It allows you then to tell multiple stories and create multiple viewpoints. And even, we'll talk about in the next part. Obviously, your story, if you're on this webinar, I'm making a prediction that your story has multiple interesting arcs to it. So how do you focus that on one of them and one learning outcome, which also may mean you're creating multiple talks. So Dave originally started with his Power of Fun talk, and it quickly evolved to the evolution of happiness. And now he has both, and they are different. So that's my hack for part 2. Taylor, like a couple questions maybe? Do you have any questions that came in the chat, or does anybody have any questions out there?
Yeah, nothing in the chat right now, it looks like. Let me double
Cool.
check. Yep, we're good there. Feel free to throw stuff in the queue, you guys, in the chat if you would want to. But I think we're good there.
And I'll keep cruising, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sweet. No, I think that's it. I say keep on cruising. I'll keep the queue rolling.
Yeah, great. So let's move on to part 3, which is the L in the value boost, right? And this is really about how can you leverage your stories and for what audience? I'll quickly go back to Dave again. here's a secret to how Dave and I took him from the $5,000 gigs up to this $50,000 packages. Like Dave's story, the real value that is connected to every audience he's spoken to has nothing to do with his experience as a professional mascot. It's not about the fluffy and the silly and the fun and the I get pissed off about it, honestly, because I'm like, you're missing the point. The true story is, and if you're a Phillies fan, you're going to love this, and I guarantee you don't know it unless you've seen Dave speak. When Dave was 3 years old, his mom went deaf. And so he was the perfect person because from 3 to 21, when the Phillies picked to put him in this random suit that, oh, by the way, Jim Henson designed for the Phillies in his creature shop in New York City, they picked the perfect person. It was Dave. He was communicating non-verbally his whole young life to get his mom's attention. And so he's weaved that into his talk. And there's so many great lessons that come from that. So as you are out there thinking about leveraging your stories, I encourage you to practice and think about like, what are all the stories, all the arcs in your life? I recently did a webinar with a networking group. Let's just get started with speaking, and we broke them up into eras, like what was your first, second, and third era of your life, and what are the stories you would tell. Often speakers think they need to tell all the stories. I even feel guilty of it even in this moment, like am I doing too much? But how do you leverage your different stories for different audiences? Two great examples I'll quickly share of people who I've helped or am now working with. Palvishay Tariq is a great friend. Like, just listen to this minute-long story and think about all the audiences that her story could relate to. Born in New York City, at 6 years old, put up for adoption in Pakistan, brought back to the U.S. As an early teen, was set up for an arranged marriage by her original biological family, not the greatest home life, ran away from home, ended up homeless in Florida in high school, slept on park benches, libraries, got jobs at restaurants to survive, made it through senior year, got a scholarship to University of Florida, triple majored, got a scholarship to master's program at Harvard, double majored, started a crypto hedge fund, and did work in blockchain in Cairo and Egypt to help them develop solar panel systems for the city. Wasn't satisfied though, so sold her crypto hedge fund to JP Morgan Chase, and was like severely depressed, suicidal, addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol. And so she was like, what am I doing? If I don't find success, I'm going to apply to Yale's PhD program in quantum physics. She did, got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and then said, nuts to it all. I'm going to help other executives because I'm stressed and I'm anxious and I'm addicted to these painkillers. Like, this is not good. Adderall's ruining my life. How can I help others? Which is the work she now does and speaks about. Like, where do you even begin? Palvishay has 20 different talks she could produce because she just knows so much. And what we found a niche is in high schools that have larger Pakistani populations around New York City. Like, just to start, it's amazing. Some connections, obviously, through Yale and Harvard as well. A second quick anecdote. Oh, I think yep. So just started chatting with this guy. If you haven't met him yet, he's amazing. Reach out to him. His name's Kevin Daly, team captain of the Harlem Globetrotters for 10 years, born and raised in Panama. Not the greatest childhood. His mom passed away at a young age. He's got a great book out. It's right here. I Never Stop Smiling. Free promo for Kevin to get his book on Amazon. Moved to LA. His dad took his family up to LA, fell in love with basketball, ended up playing in college, didn't quite make it in the pros, but like traveled around, bounced around, ended up with the Globetrotters. His big claim to fame was, if you remember the famous Gatorade commercial where Michael Jordan played the younger version of himself, that body double was Kevin Daly. And then after his playing career, got into corporate sales and the startup world, where he took a company to $1 billion valuation. He was part of like the early leadership team. And so, like, where do you start? How do you tell that whole story? As humans, we want it simple. So here's my hack for you from this part. This is part L. Part 3 is practice your stories. And there's an S here. Because what I found in working with speakers is sometimes they discount stories that they just don't think would relate to an audience, or just because it's their life. I was talking with a young person last week who wants to get into speaking outside of Miami. And she said, I was a selective mute for 11 years. That's how my life started, blah, blah, blah. And I said, whoa, 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 hold on. Pause. That's interesting. She's like, no, it's not. She said, no, it's not. It's just my life. And I said, well, it's interesting because it's unique and different. And as we know as speakers, going back to like state of your culture, yeah, there's the data part, but some of this is about the experience of the room and the emotions. So like, how can you better connect the right arcs in your story to the right audience? Probably an imperfect story, but my hack for you is to just practice all your stories for different groups, family or friends even, and let them tell you what they find value in. So that's part 3, Taylor. Again, we'll open up to questions or thoughts you might have throughout, and we'll leave time at the end too. So how are we doing?
Doing great. Yeah, nothing in the queue currently. Some
Cool.
good commentary overall.
Good.
But I think this is super valuable. And I think the more stories we have, I think the more it's kind of like raising your awareness,
Yeah.
like we
Hmm.
start
Hmm.
to figure out like there's more that we can offer than just the current thing we're offering, by having all these different stories for us to tap into. To your point about creating a syllabus and a process, we're going to start with this, then move to this, then move to this. I
Hmm.
think, one of the only ways to be able to structure something like that is to have all of these stories in your back pocket.
Hmm.
So to Dave's point, you can have the power of fun, the evolution of happiness, these individual courses that have been created. I think like the more we dig for these stories that we might not necessarily find interesting or think are interesting, the more uh the more we validate that, the more we're going
Hmm.
to be able to see how much we can bundle up and offer to our audiences to
Hmm.
create these package services.
Yeah, that is a big key, right? It's like if you have just the talk, how do you increase the value of the talk? Which alone could 10x the price tag, honestly, of your talk. But if you can add even more, and oftentimes people would ask, well, what's the answer, right? What's the ongoing training look like? My answer typically to that on a call with an interested client is typically it's 6 to 12 months, which gives them an idea and allows them to customize it. It also gives you both flexibility, and it also is on purpose because I learned this in the early like team building and HR budget days that budgets roll over 6 to 12 months. So as people are planning their event or their budget for culture, right? Let's say they have 100 employees and their budget for culture is $1,000 total. Well, then great. They're going to give everyone a $10 gas card and that's culture, right? Culture done. Like that sometimes is an answer. So again, the more, yeah, you can uncover, the more you can practice and keep adding value. Uh, I believe the more you can raise up, and that's why we're here today. So here's here's part 4. We'll do 4 and 5. Uh, Uncovering validity in your theories. So we all have our theories, right? Dave's is the power of fun, and F is a force, U is universal, and N is no. That's his theory. I remember it because I've seen it a lot. People who are in his audience remember because it's simple and easy. But how do you validate those theories? And as we know as speakers, again, the stories and anecdotal evidence can be really powerful. I mean, Kevin Daly played against Michael Jordan is it's like limitless in value, especially if you're a Bulls fan or like a Michael Jordan fan. I mean, that's amazing. Um, but can you add a layer of validity to it? And so that's the question. And as a good college professor, Professor Nat, I always ask. And so this this is what I want you to think about. This is John Drebinger. You probably don't know him. He's not on this call, I guarantee it. But I saw him years ago speaking at a safety conference. And he was valuable because John was a former safety executive and he shows up and he does his talk. It's the same every time. This one's called The Myth Safety is Boring. I show you this picture on purpose. It's granulated. He did this on Microsoft Word. He added text over it. Like that's how John does it. $10,000 for speaking engagement and ongoing consulting. Why? Because John is valid in this industry, right? He's valid in this industry. They trust his anecdotes and his stories. And he even has some like certifications and trainings that relate directly to like, if you look at this audience real quick, look at the audience there. These are all people who work at like Cisco or nuclear power plants, and their jobs are employee EHS, employee health and safety. what a perfect match. And John is a good performer and speaker, and he's a great human. So he has this validity just because of his experience. But what if you don't? How do you get people to really trust that you're the right person to tell this story? Um, here's two hacks. Number one, Google Scholar is your friend. I tell my students this all the time. If you want to research something, I ask them, "What's your go-to? How would you find an answer to this question?" Well, Google. Okay, great. Yeah, you would. You would Google, what are leadership characteristics of an executive like Taylor Payne? Okay, and you would get an answer from Google, and it would be Taylor Payne's blog about leadership characteristics. In academia, how do we add a layer of validity to it? Well, I offer Google Scholar. Here I even just it's literally scholar.google.com, but it can at least get you to some valid. I even see some like peer-reviewed journals and sites on here if you can access them all. Sometimes a question like I get access because of my access through the University of Delaware a little bit, but this is high-level research. These are articles. It's not just Uncle Joe's blog that can help to support your research. So just Google Scholars, a hack. The second is find your Professor Nat. Like Dave and I hit it off because we had a great long relationship. And I bring some validity into the room for him. When he, at the end of his talk, turns around and goes, "Okay, now we're going to go do a workshop, and Professor Nat's going to co-facilitate." People go, "Who's this whack job calling himself Professor Nat?" It's me. It's me. I'm Professor Nat. I have some experience, and people say, "Why are you Professor Nat?" I say, "Well, because I teach at colleges and universities." Oh, people go, "Huh?" So when I say find your Professor Nat, it doesn't have to be me or this person. Think about this. Maybe there is a local professor to where you are or to where you're delivering your talk who could come help you to add data, information, facilitate. Like, trust me, college professors love when people reach out to them for help. They do. "Hey, can I use or showcase part of your research in a talk or a training that I'm doing?" Think about this. One other idea there. So any thoughts there? Are there any questions, Taylor? I can cruise right
There's
into our
one that
last
kind of
part,
came
but
in.
yeah, sure,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So Steve Hughes mentioned, so he'd love to hear more specific value boost examples from like regular speakers. I think this is coming from like, I mean, you work with some really cool people, like all the
Hmm.
stories you're told are from like what feels like people beyond maybe the way we feel in this room. So
Yeah.
as let's say a normal person, a normal speaker, do we have the abilities to find this level of depth in story,
Hmm.
even though we might not have contributed to, a valuation of $1 billion or, had this crazy, immigration story or whatever it might be?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'll go back to the hack about leveraging your stories, Taylor. Like what I'm hearing is what I hear from a lot of people, right? That well, my story just maybe isn't valuable or as valuable as someone else's. That doesn't matter. I've this model is for, yes, for the Dave Raymond who happens to have some great earned media, but it's also for the person who's just getting started in speaking, trying to figure out again where those stories fit and for what audience. Um, what I hear from that is that, yeah, maybe the stories you're thinking about now, you think they're not valuable, and I bet they are. I bet they are. So much of speaking is also about the self-belief in your own stories and not just how you curate them, but what you can do. So I was I get on calls all the time with the speaker that isn't Dave, that isn't Dave. Um, and it's the same process. Like, what parts of your story are you devaluing that can really resonate, that can really shift and change the emotion in the room, or dare I say, like, affect the culture of an organization forever? Um, you don't need to be Kevin to do that. I mean, that's what I would argue. But you do need to practice your stories and see which ones are resonating and for what
I think this kind
groups,
of
for sure.
ties back into your discovery process as well, where you're drafting and testing, and
Totally.
testing, putting those stories to practice.
Yeah, it's easy to tell. Palvachet is in that same boat, right? Like, you wouldn't know her. And she's got a great immigration story, sure, and trauma, but um, she's very early on, in the speaking business, and she's doing the same exact thing, trying to figure out what arcs in her story are the parts that are valuable. This is part of the work I love to do is just listening to people tell me like, what are your stories? And oh my gosh, imagine how this could relate to a room to really again shift the emotions. So I think it's
And
a great question.
one of my favorite phrases on earth is it's hard to read the label of the bottle you're in. We don't really,
Yeah,
as
yes.
individuals, always know which of our stories are most valuable. So having a sounding board that can say, no, this story is memorable and here's why can be valuable.
Yeah, and I do it. You don't know who I am. None of you know me. You shouldn't. I'm not on HBO. Like uh, the story I told about myself at the beginning, Taylor, like that used to be, hey, I'm Nat. Like, let's get into it. Like, I don't know. Like, not anymore. I facilitated more team building than anyone on the planet. I'm validated to be here to tell you what I'm doing here, and it's because I had to tell those stories about who I am and really explore myself with other people so they could tell me, oh my gosh, Nat, that's the interesting part. There's a really famous story about my dad and the effect he had on me as a young kid that I never thought made any sense. And people tell me changes their life. They're like, oh, you give me hope in this way because of
Hmm.
that story. It's fascinating. Um, so here we go. Let's I'll just briefly
What
because
about
this one is like probably the most complicated one, but it's where I love to live, and it's been a lot of my experience. Is the E? It's the last part 5, and then we'll leave the rest of the time open for Q&A. I know we're coming up on the hour, which is flying by, but it's exponentially memorable. How do you make your talks, your experiences, your workshops, anything you're doing exponentially memorable? Um, it's it's hard to say what the answer is here, but I thought I would offer another interesting data point as you're thinking about this. So this is a goldfish. And per lots of research since 2000, the attention span of the average human has decreased to just around 8 seconds. It's another 30% decrease from the years before, which makes sense. We are inundated with new things to look at, and we forget, like the goldfish, every 8 seconds. And that attention span rivals the goldfish. So as you're designing and developing a talk, right, are you pausing? Are you giving people enough time to digest? One other interesting data point around that we learn in teaching is that in any room you're teaching or speaking to, you have the extroverts. So you pose a question, and like me, like this is the student I was, I'd raise my hand and yell out an answer. And you have the introverts who might need 8 seconds before they even think about raising their hand. So like, don't worry about silence. Don't worry about silence. Let people give people time to digest. The the hack here to make things exponentially memorable. And again, this is hard to say exactly what to do, but I always leave with this is like make it fun. And I would argue calculate your risks. Like if you know the room and you know the people and you know the culture, then you should be able to really lean in to something that they want or need or a different kind of experience, something interactive, something that gets them up and moving. I said the once a year employee engagement survey died years ago as it relates to corporate culture. I think it's going to be a controversial statement maybe with this group. I think the hour-long keynote is dead. And what I mean by that is like the hour long where someone just talks at you for an hour. Um, the best speakers, not necessarily the ones on HBO and the ones out doing it professionally and all that, like, but the best speakers in terms of engagement in the room understand that. So I would argue make it fun and like, calculate your risks here. Really think about like what could you do? I say calculate your risks because I'm not saying to do wild and crazy things as a speaker, but I'm saying to consider them and think about them and calculate how a room might react. So um, I always know I talk a lot and I talk fast. So Taylor, I appreciate you pausing me after each part. Um, I thought the rest would be a conversation, yeah, but Nat, like what did I miss or what are you all thinking? What are some other questions you have? We have a couple minutes for it.
Yeah, it was a good one here. Marissa, how do these techniques translate into getting larger speaking gigs? So, like, after you've implemented these changes, we've run through the value boost. Like,
Mhm.
now what? How do we actually position this in a way that, allows us to increase the fee?
Yeah, so I that's a great question. I think my immediate reaction is if you on and this could happen on your next like inquiry or sales call with a potential client, or it could happen with a client that you've already booked or somebody has brought you in the past, is to set up with them a call for customer discovery, and explore those questions. Let them tell you about what the bigger states of their challenges are, more about their people, more about their experiences, about the culture in which it exists. Because then, if you can deliver on something that is of great value to them, if I always use the example, if you're speaking to a sales team and you boost sales by 0.1% that next month, if this is a multi-million dollar company, I don't know if you can point to this directly, but you could make the argument that you made them $1 million the next month. Let's say I'm making up numbers. Well, then, the expert entrepreneur stops and thinks about, this is controversial too, but like, well, then could I charge $999,000, $999.99 for that? No. but but if you are increasing that value by getting to know them, so that's one simple kind of hack. And then I think like that process of just building trust as well really helps to create and build up the value. We saw it too early on, like with some of the examples from, Dave's a great example because he's been an incredible success story for me, where he has great relationships, but people were still calling him, "Hey, dude, can you come do this for free?" And uh, our answer for some of those has still been yes, but the conversation and relationship doesn't end there. Like it has to be the perfect scenario, and they have to what we would call make up the value gap for us. Uh,
Sure.
so here's an interesting like kind of pro tip that we now do before Dave talks. He will interview 3 to 5 audience members, not the leadership or the event planner, the audience members. And we would say to the client, hey, in those interviews, can you set us up with people who could also be potential clients? Like, here's our ideal client, right? Here's our ideal person. Um, another way to think about that question, which is a great one, is like, if we know this business is so incredibly referral heavy, it just is. So when you're in the room speaking, can you generate X amount of more leads because of those relationships you already have? And it can really start to grow. I mean, it can. So that's a
Yeah.
great question, though. I'll think more on that too, and kind of happy to keep thinking on that answer too.
Yeah. So this is just coming from, yeah, from me.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
can imagine there's an element of psychology here to say I'm like this package I'm putting together, this multi 6 to 12 month thing where, we do a talk and we're coming in virtual support and so on. We build this syllabus out. Um, that it can be difficult to feel worthy of $65,000, let's say, or $150,000. How do you take the first step in defining the price of a packaged offering like that and work towards overcoming some of those self-limiting beliefs, especially if you're not, you know, the most confident salesperson or marketer on earth?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because we all battle with it, right? Self-doubt, and it is, Taylor, it's so much tied into psychology and self-belief and self-worth. Um, a great question to ask is, what is your traditional budget for something like this? And to have that conversation on the call. I've often told people too, I can build packages from $5,000 to $50,000 for you. Like, tell me right now on the call what you think about that. So we're not guessing, you know.
Mhm.
Um, am I a psychiatrist or psychologist? I am not. Do I believe deeply in speakers and their stories and the value they bring? I do, because I've seen the effect it can have when you're really good in front of an audience. So, I'll think on that question more too, but I think that helps to start to answer it.
Yeah, heck yeah. And I'll put in the chat here, you guys, since we're getting to the top here. If you have more questions for Nat, natmeasley.com. He'll put his LinkedIn up,
Yep.
discovery chat, nat at your culture design is his email address. So
Hmm.
if you have any specific questions for Nat about this, I mean, he does this day in and day out. He's
Hmm.
definitely the expert in helping kind of bundle these things up and get us unstuck and in a position to be actually pitching these things. I highly, highly encourage if any of this is interesting to you, you want to go beyond the keynote and be offering these bundled solutions. Outside of the incredible value he shared, value used very strategically here with us today, and you're looking for more of that, one-on-one support, definitely reach out. Nat, thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming in today, man. It is so cool
Yeah.
to see, I don't know, just the behind the scenes look and everything I've witnessed over the last few years and the clients
Yeah.
that we've shared. Um, and thank you to all of you guys for coming in and hanging out with us. As always, this recording will be sent out tomorrow morning, and it will be inside of SpeakerFlow University, where all of our recordings live. All of that will be linked inside of that email. Let's give it up for Nat. Give him all of the SpeakerFlow love. And thank you all for being here. Great to see you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, everybody. More work to do and keep the conversation going.
Heck yeah. See you all soon.